Hello, how are you doing? This is a 360-degree photograph which I just took this late afternoon when the sun was down, and you see that I covered myself here, but that is not relevant for this tutorial. I just want to point your interest to how this distortion comes about. Why doesn't it look like a normal photograph? The reason is that it's a spherical shot, and to project a sphere onto a flat surface like this one here is not trivial, and you have several ways to project spheres or other 3D objects onto a flat screen. It will always be distorted. So this distortion goes away when you use a plugin for Facebook, for example, or YouTube, or your blog in WordPress or whatever, which makes you simulate a walk around through that scene, turning within that scene from that central point. You probably saw several things like that, and I uploaded this to Facebook, for example. And it looks on Facebook, it looks like this. And you see, I can move around now. I have this odd thing at the bottom, which I used to hide myself underneath, sort of. And here you have lit office roofs, and the Cathedral of Cologne is somewhere here in the fog. And we have a construction site here, etc. So I can walk around in that scene, and you see it's not distorted anymore because it's made for 360-degree view, or especially interesting for a pair of VR goggles like Google Daydream or HTC Vive, etc. It looks beautiful, and you're in the center of the scene. It's not comparable to what I'm doing here. Anyway, I want to show you how to create such a scene in Maya, and it's pretty easy, but in order to make it not that simple, we'll create a nice scene which we render using this technology now. So let's jump into Maya. Let's create a sphere first, like this, and scale it up quite a bit. A radius instead of 100, so we have to move away from it to see it. Let's change the resolution, make it more interesting, more round, so to say. And now I go to the side window. Wait a minute, it's here's the 4-window look view, and in the side window I select faces, and I delete most of the faces here. Delete. Now they're gone. Now I go back to object mode, and this is my sphere, or what has been left from it. Now let's introduce a new material. We go for an Arnold standard surface shader, which you see from that dot here has a shiny attitude, and that comes from specularity, and the weight is currently set to 1. Let's reduce this to 0 because the ground does not really reflect the sun, in most cases at least. The color currently is white. Let's use, say, a fractal this time. In order to see it, we need to click here. You see currently the fractal is projected oddly around the center of the sphere. You select the sphere, go to UV mapping, and just use the normal based mapping. Looks much better now, and especially with a part of a sphere, it's so simple, really. Here is the color, and here is the place 2D texture. It's a 2D texture, that fractal we have, and here is the repetition in U and V. Let's repeat this not one time or once, but 1/10, 0.1. You see nice things are happening here, and 0.1. And now we have a much less complex texture here. Okay, now let's change the surface a little bit. we want to use the sculpting tools. There are lots of sculpting tools here. The basic sculpting tool we need here is the first one. The next one would be good for smoothing, or this one for relaxing the CVs, or in this case the faces and polygons in this in this geometry. So let's use the sculpt tool for now. This is the size of my brush. If I press and hold the key B and move the mouse left mouse button clicked, I can change the size of that sculpting brush, as it's called. And so let's just brush a little bit here and there and here and there, and bigger brush like this. So we have a nice mountain. So let's exit that tool. This is the deformation we currently have. And now I scale the object down so it gets a little bit more flat. Okay, next step, we want to plant some flowers maybe on the surface. And in order to do this, we need to select it first, and we go to Generate. I'm under the modeling menu set now. I think Generate is only here. Maybe I'm wrong. And under Generate, you have the Paint Effects section, which starts here in the middle. You first have to make the object, which is currently selected, which is our rest of the sphere, paintable. So now it's paintable. Nothing happens really. It is just, we can paint in the next step. We can paint on it. So let's generate, get a brush. And the brush we're getting could be, for example, flowers. Actually, they have flowers mesh here. They are basically simpler flowers. Let's choose one of them, for example, the tulip. And now we can paint the tulips on that surface. Let's choose an area which we like to render later, maybe this valley here. So with a mouse or with a graphics pencil, I just paint the plants here. I can use the key B to create bigger plants of the same species, which doesn't really make sense, but maybe we can use it for this purpose here. Now the strokes currently are not polygons, so we need to convert them to polygons in order to render them all right. Maya does render paint effects. Actually, I can show you that. So that's what Maya renders. The plants look quite nice. You can explain this with history, because the paint effects were programmed by Duncan Brinsmead in the days before Arnold came in. Anyway, we need to convert them to polygons before we can render them with Arnold. So we select them. They're right here now. Actually, we have two strokes, the small and the bigger ones. And we go to Modify and Convert. And Convert, you find Paint Effects to Polygons. Now let's use the option box in this case. It comes like this. Vertex color mode none. We want the colors, and we want a quad output, which is in this case I think better, and it has 100,000 poly limit as a poly limit. Let's scale it down to 10,000, and now let's apply the whole thing. So the original tulips are hidden, I think. And this is what we have, these two groups here. And now we can introduce a light, an Arnold light. We can introduce a physical sky, for example. And the physical sky is wrapping around the whole scene. And now if we render it, we should be able to see something. So the sun currently comes from the left, as you can see from the shadows here from the left side. Of course, we can change the elevation of the sun here. If we like this view here, we can actually go to View and create a camera from the view. So we create a new camera, which is now called perspective 1 from that view. And let's, it's called here, it's here in the outline, it's called perspective 1 now. Let's call it our camera. And we're currently looking through that camera. And now we can find a nice position for the camera, like this maybe. And in the camera settings here, we have the camera shape and the camera. The camera is more or less the position of the camera, the pivot, etc. and its visibility in the scene. But the camera shape is where the camera features are listed. So we have the standard features like film back, etc. with the resolution, etc. But now we go down to the Arnold tab and open it. And in the Arnold tab, we're currently rendering a perspective camera. Let's redo this rendering. This is perspective rendering now. And let's save this image by clicking down here. Now it's saved here as the snapshot number 1. Now we'll change this camera type from perspective to VR. A VR camera, and we have the mode is side by side. Now if we render this, this is a typical VR look of of one scene. If you split it in the middle, you have two identically looking scenes, but they are not identical. You have two suns. Of course, there's only one sun in the scene. But if you look here, this tulip, for example, is totally covered by the leaves in front, whereas the leaves are here. So if you watch this view in using VR goggles, you will get a very drastic view of the very close tulip. And the differences are much less back there, because the objects back there don't have such a difference in the view angle of the two eyes. Now let's save this image. You can play with the VR camera settings side by side, over under, so you will get the two images you see here underneath each other, or only the left eye or only the right eye. But we will go for the spherical projection, which is here. We have a fisheye as well, but the spherical is what we need. And that's a spherical rendering now. We have only one sun, and here you see the sunlight bleeding to the right, and it's the leftovers of that bleeding is here. So we have this distance here, black. That's basically our horizon here, which we should get rid of in a proper rendering, really. This space, this length here is exactly the same as here. So you can wrap this thing around and use it in a, well, in Facebook, for example, or in a 360-degree viewer. So let's save this image now. And after I've saved it, I will load it into my blog, and then you'll see what it looks like there. So I did this in maybe 2 minutes now. I just saved the image and I loaded it into the blog as a 360-degree image. Could have done the same with a 360-degree movie, rendering a sequence of images. You would have to load them into or import them into Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro X or After Effects, and then convert it to an MP4 and then make it ready for a blog or Facebook or for YouTube. In the near future, we'll have much more options to use 360-degree renderings in different kinds of environments. So this is the view I just rendered. We're getting close to the closed tulip now. It's up here. And this is how we can move around in the scene. But as I said before, this is especially cool by looking at it with 3D 360 degree goggles. We can zoom in the scene, of course. It's a very low resolution, which I rendered, I think only 560 pixels wide. Of course, I could make it much bigger. Anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. The key thing is the spherical camera in the Arnold settings of the camera shape.